So my cold is better, but I have this really annoying cough. I'm on medication from the doctor and the cough persists. So I apologize in advance. You know, there is so much in the story that Bobby just read for us that reflects the world that we live in today. Could you tell that? Could you feel that? The world and interpersonal relationships as we know them. Let's start with the human trafficking. It's considered modern-day slavery. The FBI says that human trafficking is the third largest criminal enterprise in the world. The International Labor Organization estimates that forced labor and human trafficking is a $150 billion industry worldwide with 40.3 million victims. 81% of them are trapped in forced labor, 25% of them are children, 75% of them are women and girls. 148 goods, the U.S. Department of Commerce estimates, comes from countries where they are made by forced and child labor. In human trafficking, men are desired for manual labor, for agriculture, for factory, women for household labor and hospitality industries, you know, like cleaning your hotel rooms, beauty businesses like massage parlors and pedicures and sex workers. Children are desirable for household work. They're desirable for adoptions. They're desirable for sex workers. Some of those who are being adopted have been stolen from their families. Others have been sold by their families. Sold because the family has debt. Sold because the family has medical expenses. In some places, teens and children are stolen from their families and sold to be soldiers. All ages, all genders are desirable for their organs. Human trafficking is considered more profitable than drugs. The risk-reward ratio is more favorable if you traffic in humans. Each sale is worth somewhere between $4,000 and $50,000 per person. What do you think you would bring on the open market? We contribute to this industry when we make immigration laws more difficult and quotas lower even for refugees. We contribute when we buy cheap goods without checking their sources. We contribute when we dismiss the worries and concerns of families of teenagers and Native American women who disappear and are eventually discovered to be trapped in sex trafficking. 40% of Native American women are eventually discovered to be trapped in sex trafficking. We contribute when we blame the victim for putting themselves at risk or getting into the situation, for refusing to hear their stories. Significant numbers of sex-trafficked children are foster children, or former foster children, or runaway girls who have been abused at home, and now that's how they support themselves because that's all they know, to use their body. We contribute by using businesses with dodgy backroom economies. Do you know that 4 people were arrested earlier this year in Bremerton, Silverdale, Poulsbo? We can help. We can be alert. If we see something suspicious, we can say something and keep saying it until somebody takes us seriously. You know, airline crews are being trained to watch those who are brought on airlines for suspicious behavior. Is it winter and they're wearing summer clothes? Are they really shut down? Do they never get to make their own decisions, like even what kind of drink to have on the airplane? Are they afraid? Are they anxious? Be careful who you hire at home. If you're going to tip somebody like your pedicurist, maybe you could give them a tip in cash directly to their hands instead of through the business owner's card reader. Just maybe that way they'll get it. Now this connects with our story because our buddy Joseph was a human trafficking victim. He was sold by his family. He was sold by his brothers to traders who sold him to slave buyers. And there he worked. Now, Joseph is resourceful and he's good at what he's doing, so he moved up in the household, in Potiphar's household. He moved up the promotion ladder until he got honorable and he said, no, I won't have sex with the master's wife. And so then, because he did not have the same social status as she had, he doesn't get believed. He gets sent to jail. He doesn't get a trial or justice. He just gets locked up in prison. So why was Joseph sold by his family? Do you recognize the psychology in that family? Competition between siblings? Anybody grow up in a family like that? The brothers were in competition for dad's attention, for family resources, in competition for their own sense of self-worth. Joseph was one of those brothers, the kind who could do no wrong. He excelled in everything that he did. He was a parental favorite. He was the first son of the first wife. Well, la-di-da, some of the other boys were the first sons of the other wives, and some of the other boys were pretty darn good in what they did too, but Joseph counted. And then he had to go be a spy, be a tattletale, a know-it-all. What a brat. And if we're honest, we know it wasn't all Joseph's fault. It was also his parents' fault. Sometimes parents have odds or favorites, and they play them against each other. Sometimes they give one child more than another. Sometimes they have one child spy on other children and tattle. But Joseph also did it to himself, the bragging he did about his dreams. You know, dreams are really important in that culture. Dreams were considered a way that God spoke to the people, the way that God gave them messages and plans and ideas. And Joseph got these dreams and he interpreted them and he said, look, I'm going to be so famous and I'm going to be so important and you're going to have to bow down and worship me. Isn't this cool? Some days they could ignore him, but other days, not so much. They got tired of losing. They got tired of feeling second best. They wanted things to change. And then one day, perhaps, when they were caught doing something they shouldn't have been doing, some interpretations say they went swimming instead of tending the sheep. That's apocryphal, it's not in the book. And Joseph shows up spying and they snap. And they take matters into their own hands and they do something that presumably they will come to regret. But you know, sometimes when you take snap actions, it's all of a sudden too late, isn't it? There's no backing up, there's no doing over, there's no undoing what you did. Has that ever happened to you? The story is about parents and children and siblings, but it could be about grandparents and aunts and uncles and teachers and coaches and bosses and friends and many others with whom we interact. Are you the one in charge who favors one of your people over another? Is your behavior the kind that causes others to think that you do? Do you have a favorite child or grandchild? Are you one of those who are privileged? How do you wear your privilege? Like you deserve it? Do you like to show off your status? Do you like to use it to gain advantages for yourself? Do you use your privilege to get advantages for others? Do you wish everyone would realize how hard it is for you to be so privileged? Or are you like Joseph, too immature, too inexperienced to really recognize yet that you have privilege? Are you one of the non-privileged who needs to work extra hard to get recognition? Does it seem like no matter how hard you work, it will never be enough? Do you wonder why you bother trying, since you'll never measure up or be trusted or get that promotion? Are you always under suspicion of misbehavior just because of your rank in the society? Are you the first to be blamed, not because you've done something, but because of who you are? I've known students like that. I had a student for a while. Anything bad went wrong, oh, it must have been Aaron's fault. You might not have even been there, but of course it was Aaron's fault. Go to the other end of the story. Joseph was treated wrongly. Are you one who was treated hugely wrongly? And are you the one who is not likely to forget it? Ever? Are you the kind who says, let bygones be bygones? Are you the one who has done something terribly wrong? And do you hold your guilt so tight like a second skin that's made out of lead and just weighs you down? Or you've done something wrong and you have reasons and explanations and justifications for why you did, and you'll stick by those no matter what. Or are you like Reuben? Reuben, who really didn't want to do bad to his brothers, but wasn't sure how to speak up in front of the others. So he tries, no, let's not kill him, let's just put him in the hole, thinking he'll come back later. Not now, but later. Except that later is too late. Are you like the wine steward? You know, when he gets into prison and he interprets a dream for a wine steward, the wine steward says, if I get out of here, I'm going to remember. And Joseph says, tell me, tell the Pharaoh about me. And the wine steward says, I will. But he forgets for 2 years. You know, Joseph was in slavery for 3 years and in prison for about 10. It's a long time. When he's released from prison, he moves quickly up the ladder in Pharaoh's household. He moves up so fast and so high that when his family shows up later, they do not recognize him. They don't expect to see him where he is, so they don't see him. You know how when you expect to see something you do and you don't. Well, they don't expect him up here in charge, and so they don't see him. He's not in the context where they expected to see him. Their expectations are biased. The truth is often different than our biases. The family is also out of context. They're not in the place that is familiar to them and comfortable and known. They're facing a whole different set of circumstances. Instead of being prosperous in Israel, now they are in Egypt and they are beggars. Instead of being happy as a large family, despite the sibling rivalry, they are still weighed down by guilt and grief and regret and remorse. And when Joseph recognizes his family, he can see that and he has some choices to make. He could turn them away. He could throw them away like they threw him away. He could welcome them with compassion and forgiveness despite what they did to him. He could treat them as God treated him, with kindness and mercy and grace. He could understand how the way he behaved had been seen by them, had been felt by them, and how, had he been more mature, he could have done differently. He could remember the stories of God that were told by his father Isaac and by his grandfather Abraham. His grandfather Isaac and his great-grandfather Abraham. Stories about journeys and conflicts and trials and promises and faithfulness of God. He could have remembered those stories and grown in his own faith and understanding. Just like in Joseph's life, in our lives, there are many things that are beyond our control. Joseph didn't ask to get sold into slavery. He didn't ask to be treated special. But he could choose how he responded to those choices. He could choose how he dealt with the outcomes. Joseph bragged to his brothers. That was his choice. The Vietnamese who were found in that cargo van, some of them came from a very poor province in Vietnam, a province that had a huge natural disaster earlier this year and shut down like 40,000 jobs in their community. People were looking for work. They had to do something. They were desperate. So they signed up to go to the UK to get jobs. Young girls who are living on the street, they say yes to men who say, I know where you can get a modeling job. Doesn't that sound glamorous? Those things could turn out well. Then again, they might not. The Vietnamese lost their lives in that cargo truck. We're still sorting out the why now. Young girls are enslaved in ways they cannot escape until someone intervenes and assists them. Joseph was sold into slavery. He was separated from his family. Eventually, Joseph is able to see God working through Joseph to turn the bad situation around. He tells his brothers, what you chose for harm, God chose for good. And Bobby read for us a long section where Joseph says, God sent me ahead of you to do this. God sent me ahead of you to prepare for you. I personally would interpret God's actions differently than Joseph did. I'm not very fond of theology that gives God credit for doing bad things to people, for getting Joseph sold into slavery in the first place. God didn't sell Joseph into slavery. Joseph's brothers did that. And the only reason Joseph's brothers could do that is because somebody was willing to buy him. Joseph did antagonize his brothers. I'll grant that. But for God to be just throwing people around willy-nilly and sending them into bad places so that bad things can happen, so that other people can rescue them, that sounds really capricious. And that does not sound like the steady, steadfast God, dependable God, faithful God that I have known. I can support a theology that credits God with redeeming Joseph out of jail, because God gave Joseph courage so that Joseph could speak up to the wine steward and say, remember me. God gave Joseph patience so that he could wait until the time came when something would happen. God would touch the hearts of the advocates who could say, hey, I know this bloke in jail. He could interpret your dreams, Mr. Pharaoh. God can redeem ugly situations. There was a famine in Israel, but God was able to send Joseph's family to Egypt, where not only were they fed, but they were reconciled with his family. God was able to redeem Joseph's heart with divine grace and growth in spirit so that Joseph knows how to be generous, instead of how to be bragging, but how to be generous. Instead of taking only the gifts that are given to him, how to give also to others. Now the damage and the hurt and the pain, we all experience that, and that doesn't go away because somebody does something nice. It's already happened. It cannot be undone. And sometimes the scars are significant and they will last for a very long time. But Joseph chooses, and his family chooses, to no longer be controlled by that damage, to no longer let that pain and that scar take over their lives. They choose instead to respond to the love and mercy of God. Joseph chooses to work with God to transform an ugly situation into a public service. His time from jail into caring for the people of Egypt and also the people of his family so that everybody eats during a time of need. Joseph and his family can choose to move forward with generosity, with grace, the same kind that was shown to them by God, they can show to each other and to others. This week in the news there was a story about a judge, and I didn't get her name. She is one of 2 judges in the United States who were once foster children. She went from being a foster child to being a lawyer to being a judge, sitting in the family court, making decisions about foster children and adoptions. And for her, this was a way to turn around what was not one of the best parts of her life, to make sure that others don't have horrible situations, but good situations to move forward. Joseph gives God credit for steadfastness, for strength, for the understanding of dreams, for grace. There's so much about this story that is reflected in our world today. Problems created by people and their attitudes, problems solved or avoided by people and their attitudes, guidance and courage and grace and blessing found. Because sometimes you find what you're looking for. And when you're looking for those things with God, you especially find them. Long after Joseph's time, some of God's prophets would write some wise words. Jeremiah wrote, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. For that one is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green." Joseph trusted God, hung in with God, went a very long time in a very bad place with a lot of hurt and pain. But with God's help, he came out the other side. And there's a story we can tell our grandkids and our great-grandkids. There's a story we can tell our own hearts about turning rejection around for good. May you know that part of the story and live it. Amen.